the nanny who made an orphaned baby call her a mommy, and won the heart of a billionaire CEO, a wealthy man scarred by tragedy. A nanny who walked through his gates and changed everything. A forbidden passion that dared to defy all rules. This is a story that will stay in your heart forever. Where are you watching from right now? Drop it in the comments, and don't forget to rate this story from 0 to 10 at the end. Trust me, you'll want to see how this unfolds. The tragedy arrived without warning. Jonathan and Rebecca Hayes died on a Sunday afternoon returning from their weekend getaway in the Hamptons. The accident on Interstate 95 left no survivors. In a matter of seconds, little Matthew lost his parents and Ethan lost his brother. 1 month later, the Connecticut estate still breathed mourning. The marble corridors echoed only with silence and the occasional cry of the 1-year-old baby. Ethan wandered through the house like a ghost, trying to understand how he had become a father overnight. At 28 years old, he now commanded Hayes Industries and cared for Matthew. 2 responsibilities that weighed like the entire world on his shoulders. The sleepless nights left marks on his face. He constantly ran his hands through his hair, a nervous tic he developed after the funeral. "You need help," his mother Victoria said one March morning. She held Matthew in her arms, but the exhaustion was visible in every line of her expression. "We can't continue like this." That's when Margaret Sullivan called. "I have someone perfect for you," she said from the other end of the line. "My nanny isn't going to London with us anymore. She has to stay to care for her parents. She has a degree in early childhood education, has a special gift with children." Rebecca adored her. Her name was Claire Bennett, 24 years old. She arrived on a sunny morning, crossing the gates as if bringing hope in her caramel leather bag. She wore light blue, simple, but there was something different about her. A serenity that cut through the heavy atmosphere of the house like a fresh breeze. Ethan met her in the entrance hall and felt something strange in his chest. She greeted him with a restrained smile, polite, but her eyes were too deep for someone so young. In the office, she sat upright in the leather armchair and spoke about her experience with a melodious voice that filled the silence of the house. Ethan tried to concentrate on her resume, on her references, but found himself observing how she gestured gently while explaining her techniques in child development. "The Sullivans are like family to me," she said, "but London wasn't an option. My parents need me here." Something stirred inside him. Someone who put family above an opportunity abroad. He knew that feeling. Then they brought in Matthew. The baby had been restless, whimpering softly since he woke up. But when Claire picked him up, something magical happened. Matthew stopped crying instantly. She began to hum, making a gentle caress on his back. Ethan felt his throat tighten. It was exactly how Rebecca used to cradle her son. The same sweetness, the same maternal instinct that had been missing for so long in that house. Matthew rested his head on Claire's shoulder, as if it were the most natural place in the world. "When can you start?" Ethan asked, his voice rougher than he intended. "Immediately, if you prefer." Her smile lit up the room. For the first time in a month, something in that house felt right. The following days brought a transformation to the Hayes estate. Claire arrived at 7 sharp every morning, bringing an energy that dissolved the fog of sadness. Her routine with Matthew was perfect. Bottles at the exact temperature, naps at the right times, baths that transformed into moments of pure joy. Matthew's laughter began to echo through the corridors again. Ethan created excuses to work from home. Video conferences that he used to do at the company now happened in the library, from where he could hear Claire humming lullabies. The sound mixed with the noises of the house coming back to life. The casual encounters in the corridors began to awaken something neither of them was prepared to admit. When they bumped into each other in the kitchen, when she made breakfast, when they both reached for Matthew at the same time. Small accidental touches that left invisible marks. Ethan felt his heart race without explanation. Claire lowered her eyes, a slight blush tinging her cheeks. It was just work, they repeated to themselves, but the truth was that the Hayes estate had gained more than a nanny. It had gained hope, and perhaps, just perhaps, the possibility of a love that neither of them saw coming. Matthew slept peacefully for the first time in weeks. Claire arranged the toys scattered around the room, humming softly. Ethan watched from afar, pretending to read reports. He didn't know it yet, but his life was about to change forever. After all, destiny has its plans, and sometimes they begin with a simple interview on a March morning. The nights transformed into a sweet torment. Ethan listened through the baby monitor to Claire's voice singing Matthew to sleep. He closed his eyes and could imagine her perfectly. Hair loose after a long day, gentle fingers making circles on his nephew's back, that smile reserved for the most tender moments. Claire fought against the whirlwind of emotions that invaded her every time Ethan appeared without warning. She observed him discreetly during meals. The way he looked at Matthew with tenderness, how his strong hands held his nephew with delicacy, how his face assumed a touching vulnerability in the rare moments when he spoke about his brother. The mornings became an exercise in self-control. Ethan began to appear earlier for breakfast. Claire pretended not to notice how her heart raced when he appeared in the kitchen. His masculine scent invaded her senses, and she concentrated on Matthew's baby food to avoid trembling hands. One afternoon changed everything between them. Matthew had a persistent fever. Claire didn't leave the baby's side for hours, monitoring every temperature fluctuation, applying cold compresses with infinite dedication. Ethan canceled all his meetings that day. It was impossible to concentrate on work while his nephew was sick. That night, he found her asleep in the armchair in Matthew's room. The baby slept in her lap, and the fever had subsided. The lamplight illuminated the simple but touching scene. Ethan felt something inside him transform definitively. Carefully, so as not to wake them, he covered Claire with a blanket. His fingers lightly brushed her shoulder. The shiver he felt had nothing to do with the room temperature. Claire woke hours later, wrapped in the warmth of the blanket and Ethan's unmistakable scent. Her heart accelerated when she realized the gesture of care, so intimate, so respectful. Matthew slept peacefully in his crib, probably transferred by Ethan with the same silent affection. The following days brought a new tension to the air, dense, loaded with unspoken possibilities. The glances became longer, the silences more significant. Ethan began to notice details he previously tried to ignore. How Claire bit her lip slightly when she was concentrated, how her eyes sparkled when she laughed, and how her presence filled the empty spaces of the mansion with a light he thought he'd never see again. The peace was broken on a Saturday afternoon. Victoria organized a lunch to welcome the Sullivans, who would leave for London the following week. The winter garden transformed into the perfect setting for the farewell. Ethan watched Claire discreetly while she helped organize the table. She seemed to float among the guests, balancing her professional role with natural charm, enchanting everyone. Margaret Sullivan couldn't help but notice the exchanged glances during lunch. The chemistry between them was impossible to hide. It was in the air like something about to explode. When Matthew started to whimper, it was Ethan who stood up first, but Claire was already there. Their bodies almost touched when they both leaned over the baby. "Let me take care of him." Claire's voice came out softer than normal. Her fingers accidentally brushed against Ethan's when she picked up Matthew. The touch, though brief, sent shivers through both their bodies. Her scent invaded Ethan's senses. His heart raced uncontrollably. It was at this moment that Victoria noticed her youngest son, always so controlled, looked at the nanny like Jonathan used to look at Rebecca, with that special glow that no mother could ignore. The weight of that realization hit her like lightning. The following weeks brought subtle changes to the mansion's atmosphere. Claire's presence had become indispensable not only for Matthew but for the entire dynamic of the house. The mornings began with the aroma of freshly brewed coffee. The sound of her laughter echoed through the kitchen. Ethan, previously so methodical in his schedule, now found excuses to have his coffee at home. It was on one of those mornings that the inevitable happened. Matthew had started to take his first steps, wobbly and uncertain. Claire held him by his little hands in the winter garden, encouraging each movement with sweet words. Ethan watched the scene hidden behind a column. His heart stopped when his nephew let go of Claire's hands. 3 steps alone, then he fell sitting on the carpet, laughing. "Matthew!" they both shouted in unison. They ran to the baby. Their bodies lightly collided in the rush to reach the child. Ethan felt the heat of Claire's body against his. Her intoxicating scent invaded his senses. For a moment they were paralyzed, too close to maintain sanity, too distant to satisfy the desire growing between them. Matthew, oblivious to the moment of tension, let out a delicious laugh. It broke the spell instantly. Claire pulled away quickly, her cheeks tinged with a delicate pink. Ethan remained there, still feeling the ghost of her touch on his body, fighting against the impulse to pull her back into his arms. Victoria watched everything from afar, her maternal heart divided between concern and understanding. She saw in Ethan the same expression Jonathan had when he met Rebecca, that look of someone who found something precious and unexpected. She saw in Claire the same genuine dedication that made Rebecca such a beloved Hayes, but a question wouldn't leave Victoria's mind. What would happen when this impossible love could no longer be hidden? The night, when everyone had already retired, Ethan found Claire in the library. She was organizing the children's books she had separated from Matthew, humming softly an old lullaby. The lamplight created golden shadows around her. Ethan felt his determination waver. "You're incredible with him." His voice came out rougher than normal. Claire startled. "It's my job," she responded softly, avoiding his gaze. No, Ethan took a step in her direction. "It's much more than that. You brought life back to this house, to Matthew." He hesitated, his heart hammering against his chest. "To me." The silence that followed was dense with possibilities. Claire felt her entire body tremble, every cell aware of Ethan's proximity. He was too close now. His masculine scent mixed with the smell of old books in the library. "Ethan," she began. The words died in her throat when she felt his fingers gently touch her face. "I know I shouldn't," he murmured, his eyes fixed on her lips. "I know there are 1,000 reasons not to do this, but Claire." His other hand found her waist, pulled her gently closer. "I can't pretend anymore that I don't feel what I feel." Time seemed to freeze. The ticking of the centennial clock mixed with their panting breaths. Claire could feel the warmth of Ethan's hand on her waist, his long fingers pressing lightly against the fabric of her dress. His thumb caressed her face with torturous delicacy. Waves of electricity ran through her entire body. Ethan leaned slowly, his eyes never leaving hers. Claire felt his woody scent invade her senses. Her legs trembled, and she instinctively rested her hands on his chest. She felt under her fingers Ethan's heart beating as irregularly as hers. The first touch of their lips was soft, almost reverent. Ethan kissed her as if she were made of crystal, with a tenderness that made Claire's eyes fill with tears. When she sighed against his mouth, something inside Ethan broke. The kiss transformed, became deeper, more urgent, more desperate. One of his hands moved up to her nape, fingers intertwining in her silky hair. The other pulled her even closer, eliminating any space between their bodies. She could feel his warmth through his shirt, his broad chest pressed against hers. Claire felt herself melting in his arms. Her hands slid across his broad chest until they found Ethan's nape. Fingers played with the strands at the base of his neck. The low moan he let out sent shivers down her spine. Their lips moved in perfect synchrony now. Ethan held her face between his hands and bit her lower lip firmly. Claire gasped, and he invaded her mouth without asking permission. His tongue took her with urgency, stealing her breath. She tried to resist for a second, but surrendered with the same hunger, as if she had waited for that moment her entire life. His hands descended down her back, pressed against the curve of her waist. She arched her body against his, completely losing control. The world around them disappeared. There was no more library, no rules or social conventions, only the heat of their bodies united. The taste of that kiss that seemed to heal all wounds. fill all voids. Both their breathings were uncontrolled, panting, desperate. Ethan pressed Claire gently against the bookshelf. Their bodies pressed together. She could feel every tense muscle of his. The desire pulsing between them was almost unbearable. When they finally separated, the world seemed to have shifted on its axis. Ethan rested his forehead against hers, eyes still closed, savoring every sensation. The jasmine scent from Claire's hair mixed with the sweet taste of her lips, a sensory memory he knew he would never forget. "This is madness," Claire whispered, her hands still clutching his shirt as if she feared that letting go would reveal it all to be a dream. "No," Ethan responded with a conviction that surprised them both. For the first time in a long while, something makes sense. A noise in the corridor cut them like a blade. Claire pulled away with a start, as if his touch had burned her skin. Her swollen lips, flushed cheeks, everything denounced what had just happened. Ethan ran his hands through his hair, a nervous gesture she already knew so well. "I'm sorry," he began, taking a step in her direction. "I don't regret it, but maybe the timing wasn't right." "I can't," Claire interrupted him, her voice trembling. "You're my employer, Ethan. Matthew, your family." "Claire," he tried to reach her, but she was already moving toward the door. "Please," she begged, tears shining in her eyes. "I need to think." Ethan stood in the library, feeling her scent dissolve in the air, hearing the sound of her steps moving away down the corridor. He still burned with the memory of the kiss, with the warmth of her in his arms, with the certainty that nothing would ever be the same again. The next day, the tension in the mansion was impossible to ignore. Claire arrived at her usual time, but her eyes avoided meeting Ethan's. She concentrated on Matthew, on her routines, acting as if the previous night hadn't happened. But her fingers trembled slightly when preparing the bottle. Her heart raced every time she heard footsteps approaching. Ethan felt like an inexperienced teenager. Every time he saw her with Matthew, every time he heard her voice down the corridor, he reacted. The memory of the kiss haunted him, made it impossible to concentrate on anything else. Victoria observed the dynamic between her son and Claire with a mixture of concern and understanding. In her 3 decades as matriarch of the Hayes family, she had learned to read between the lines, in the silences, in the furtive glances, in the suspended breaths. She saw in Ethan the same restlessness Jonathan had shown when falling in love with Rebecca, that contained energy of someone fighting against a feeling bigger than themselves. But this time, there was something different in the air, a tension that threatened to explode at any moment. And Victoria knew that when that happened, nothing in the Hayes family would be the same. The weeks passed like a silent dance. Matthew, now almost 2 years old, was getting stronger every day, more confident in his steps through the mansion's corridors. His babbling of daddy and mommy brought tears to everyone's eyes, a bittersweet mixture of joy and longing. May arrived with its typical Connecticut rain, and with it, the proximity of Matthew's 2nd birthday. The date that would naturally bring up the absence of Jonathan and Rebecca needed to be transformed. Victoria took responsibility for the preparations. She was determined to honor her son's memory through her grandson's happiness. "We need to do something special," she declared during breakfast, carefully observing Ethan and Claire's reactions. "Matthew deserves a celebration of life." The mention of the party brought a new dynamic to the mansion. Claire, with her natural sensitivity, suggested a theme that united Rebecca's passion for flowers with Jonathan's love for animals. A garden safari. The idea lit up Victoria's face, who immediately began making plans. Ethan found Claire leaning over decoration catalogs in the library one afternoon. Her hair fell like a dark curtain over her concentrated face. He had to fight the impulse to touch it. Since the kiss weeks ago, they had established a careful dance of proximity and distance, professionalism and contained desire. "The party needs to be at sunset," Claire suggested, her soft voice filling the space between them. "The garden looks more beautiful with the golden light of late afternoon." Ethan watched how she bit her lower lip slightly while leafing through the catalogs, a habit he had involuntarily memorized. Their fingers accidentally brushed when she passed him some fabric samples. The brief contact sent shivers through both their bodies. Rebecca would have loved this, he murmured, touching a fabric that imitated foliage. The comment made Claire raise her eyes. She met his for a moment. They shared a silence loaded with mutual understanding. The mansion gained new life with the preparations. Victoria coordinated a team of decorators. Claire personally took care of the children's menu, and Ethan found himself several times testing recipes in the kitchen. The apron marked her delicate waist. Flour occasionally stained her cheek in a way he found irresistible. One afternoon, while they were trying the sweets that would be served, Matthew escaped from his high chair. He ran, wobbling toward the garden. Ethan and Claire ran after him. Their bodies collided when they simultaneously reached the toddler. The accidental touch, the shared warmth, the panting breath, everything conspired to break the barriers they had established. "I'm sorry," Claire whispered, but didn't pull away. Ethan could count every eyelash that framed her eyes, feel the vanilla scent emanating from her skin. "Don't apologize," he responded, his voice hoarse. "Not for this." Matthew let out a laugh, breaking the moment, but something had changed. The pretense of maintaining professional distance was beginning to crumble, like a sandcastle against the tide. The day before the party brought a different energy to the mansion. The garden was already partially decorated. Delicate structures imitating African tree branches, earthy-toned fabrics creating cozy environments, strategically positioned flowers in silent homage to Rebecca. Small stuffed animals hid among the foliage. Lions, giraffes, elephants creating an enchanted safari. Claire supervised the final details of the cake when Ethan entered the kitchen. Matthew was taking his afternoon nap. The silence between them seemed to amplify every small noise. The clinking of utensils, the soft hum of the refrigerator, their irregular breathings. "I found this in Jonathan's office." Ethan broke the silence, his voice softer than normal. In his hands, a photo album showed Rebecca pregnant, radiant in a flowery dress. Jonathan beside her with that smile so similar to Matthew's. Claire approached to see better. Her arm brushed against Ethan's. The heat of that innocent contact seemed to burn through the layers of clothing. "He has his father's smile," she murmured, her fingers lightly touching the photograph. "And his eyes," Ethan completed. His voice choked. "Sometimes when I look at him, it's like seeing Jonathan again." Without thinking, Claire covered his hand with hers. The gesture, so natural and at the same time so intimate, made the air between them grow dense. Ethan intertwined his fingers with hers. For a moment they stayed like this, connected not only by touch but by mutual understanding of loss and hope. The album slipped from his hand, forgotten on the counter. "Claire," he began, turning to face her. They were too close now, her scent mixed with the vanilla aroma that filled the kitchen. Their still intertwined fingers burned like embers. His eyes descended to her lips, and she felt her heart skip a beat. He leaned in slightly, and she didn't pull away. The sound of footsteps in the corridor cut them like a blade. They separated with a start. Claire pretended to adjust the cake. Ethan picked up the album, his hands trembling imperceptibly. Victoria entered carrying more decorations. If she noticed anything in the charged atmosphere of the kitchen, she chose not to comment. But her mother's eyes noticed everything. Claire's flushed cheeks, Ethan's altered breathing, the tension that practically vibrated in the air between them. And for the first time, Victoria wondered if she was prepared for what was about to happen in her family. The morning of the party brought a special energy to the Hayes estate. Claire woke Matthew with redoubled affection, conscious of the significance of that day. His second birthday, a date that marked not only his arrival in the world, but also almost a year since the loss of his parents. The baby, oblivious to the layers of emotion the day carried, smiled when he saw her. His eyes sparkled with joy. Ethan found them in the kitchen during breakfast. Claire was helping Matthew with his fruit baby food. Some strands escaped to frame her face. The domestic scene hit him with unexpected force, the naturalness with which she cared for his nephew, the way Matthew looked at her with adoration, how she seemed to belong perfectly in that space, in that family. "Good morning." His voice came out rougher than normal, attracting Claire's gaze. She blushed slightly, remembering the intimate moment they had shared in the kitchen the day before. "Uncle?" Matthew exclaimed happily, stretching his little arms toward his uncle. Ethan picked him up, breathed in that clean baby smell, felt love overflowing in his chest. Claire observed the interaction, her heart accelerating as she watched the tenderness with which Ethan held his nephew. There was something deeply touching in how that powerful man completely melted in Matthew's small hands. The day promised to be perfect. The June sky presented a crystalline blue, rare for the season, as if even time conspired to celebrate Matthew's 2 years. The mansion's garden had transformed into an enchanted savanna, elegant tents creating welcoming environments, delicate chandeliers hanging from tree branches. Small details told the love story of Jonathan and Rebecca through the decoration choices. The sky painted itself in shades of pink and gold when the moment for happy birthday arrived. Matthew in Ethan's arms looked fascinated at the little candles that twinkled on top of the cake, a 3-tiered work of art that delicately reproduced the safari theme. Small sugar animals among pasta Americana foliage. The silence that preceded the song was loaded with emotion. Victoria, beside her son, discreetly held a silk handkerchief. In the photos strategically positioned near the cake table, the eternalized smiles of Jonathan and Rebecca seemed to bless that moment. Claire began to sing Happy Birthday, her melodious voice guiding the guests. Ethan felt his eyes burn hearing Matthew babble along, trying to follow the music. The little one was growing, changing every day, and his parents weren't there to see it. When the voices fell silent, Ethan leaned with his nephew to blow out the candles. It was at this moment that Matthew, with the innocence typical of his 2 years, stretched his little arms toward Claire. Mommy. Time seemed to freeze. The entire garden held its breath. Claire froze, tears welling up in her eyes. Ethan stared at her with an intensity that left her breathless. Victoria was the first to move, breaking the moment with a grace that only matriarchs possess. But something fundamental had changed in that instant. A truth that could no longer be ignored. A feeling that overflowed all social barriers and conventions. The rest of the party passed like a blur for Ethan and Claire. The guests began to leave as the sky darkened, taking with them sweets in delicate boxes and comments about how much Matthew was growing. But the word mommy echoed in everyone's ears, especially Victoria's. When the last guest departed, Ethan found Claire in the garden. She stood near the fountain, her hands trembling slightly as she picked up a photo of Rebecca that was part of the decoration. The soft light from the chandeliers created a glow in her loose hair. "Claire," Ethan called softly, approaching. "I'm sorry," she murmured, still not looking at him. "I never intended to replace anyone." "Look at me," he asked, his voice loaded with emotion. When she finally raised her eyes, there were tears shining in them. "You're not replacing anyone. You're creating your own space in his heart." He paused. "In my heart?" The confession hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. Claire felt her entire body tremble when Ethan took another step in her direction, eliminating the distance that separated them. "I'm in love with you," he said, his voice hoarse. "I fought against this for months. I tried to maintain distance, tried to respect conventions. But today, seeing you with Matthew, I understood that I can't deny it anymore." Claire felt her legs weaken with the intensity of those words. Ethan held her by the waist, preventing her from pulling back. The warmth of his large hands passed through the thin fabric of her dress, sending waves of electricity through her entire body. "Ethan," she whispered. The words died in her throat when he leaned in. His lips lightly brushed her neck. The touch was soft but burned like fire. She gasped, her hands instinctively clutching his shirt. "Tell me you feel the same," he murmured against her skin. His hot breath sent shivers down her entire spine. But before Claire could respond, a light turned on in the library window. Victoria was there, observing everything. Then Ethan saw her. Victoria watched from the window. Her gaze said everything. The garden was immersed in semi-darkness, illuminated only by the soft lights that still hung from the trees. Ethan's hands slid down her back, brought her closer. His lips traced a path of soft kisses to her ear. Claire couldn't contain a low moan when she felt his teeth lightly graze her earlobe. Her hands clutched his broad shoulders, felt the tense muscles under the thin fabric of his shirt. "You can't imagine," he murmured against her skin, "how long I've dreamed of this." Their mouths met with urgency, a kiss loaded with desire contained for months. Ethan's hands wandered over her back, her waist, provoking shivers wherever they touched. Claire felt herself melting against him, lost in the sensations those touches awakened. Ethan gently pressed her against one of the garden columns, their bodies now completely pressed together. Claire could feel his heart beating against hers, the warmth of his masculine body enveloping her completely. It was when his hands found the hem of her dress that Ethan stopped abruptly, his heavy breathing against her neck. "Not like this," he murmured, forcing himself to pull away a few inches. "You deserve more than a moment of passion in the garden. You deserve to be respected, courted." Claire trembled with the loss of contact, but her heart filled with even more love for the nobility of that gesture. The sound of footsteps on the porch made them separate completely. Victoria appeared carrying a sleeping Matthew in her arms. "I think someone didn't make it to the end of his own party," she commented softly, pretending not to notice their flushed faces and altered breathings. Victoria observed her son and Claire quickly recomposing themselves, an enigmatic smile on her lips. "I'm going to put Matthew to bed," she announced, turning to go inside. Before disappearing completely, she added, "Ethan, when you finish your conversation with Claire, I'd like to speak with you in the office." Ethan's heart accelerated, but not with desire this time. He knew that tone of his mother well, the same one she had used when she discovered Jonathan's relationship with Rebecca. "She knows," Claire murmured, nervously adjusting her dress. "Let me talk to her." Ethan held her trembling hands between his. "I won't allow anything to separate us now." In the office, the air was loaded with expectation. Victoria sat in her favorite armchair, the one that belonged to her late husband. The lamplight cast soft shadows on her aristocratic face. "Sit down, son," she began, her voice surprisingly soft. "We need to talk about what's happening between you and Claire." Ethan straightened in his chair, prepared to defend his feelings. But before he could speak, Victoria raised her hand, silencing him. "When your brother told me he was in love with Rebecca, I had my reservations," she continued. "She was a ballet teacher, came from a simple family. But you know what I learned, my son, that true love doesn't care about titles or bank accounts." Ethan felt his heart stop for a moment, surprised by the direction of the conversation. Victoria stood up, walked to the shelf where dozens of family photos lined up in silver frames. "Rebecca brought light to this house," she continued, softly touching a photo of her older son with his daughter-in-law, "just as Claire is doing now. I see how Matthew looks at her, how she loves him as if he were her own son. I see how you smile again, Ethan." She turned to face him, her eyes shining with contained tears. "And for months I've watched you two fighting against what you felt. I saw her respect for Rebecca's memory. I saw your concern about maintaining appropriate distance. And you know what else I saw. The same look Jonathan had for Rebecca. That glow that only true love brings." Ethan felt his throat tighten with emotion. "Mom, I haven't finished," she interrupted him gently. "Today, when Matthew called her mommy, I saw the fear in her eyes. The fear of disrespecting Rebecca's memory. But you know what Rebecca told me once when she was pregnant? That if something happened to her, she wanted Matthew to have a mother who loved him as much as she did. Victoria approached her son, held his face between her hands like she did when he was small. Claire is that person, Ethan, and you deserve to be happy again. Where is Claire? Ethan asked, standing up abruptly. In Matthew's room. Probably. She always checks if he's well covered before leaving, Victoria responded with a soft smile. Ethan climbed the stairs 2 at a time, his heart beating irregularly. He found Claire exactly where his mother had predicted. She was leaning over Matthew's crib, delicately adjusting his blanket. "Marry me," he said without preamble. She turned, startled. "What?" "Marry me," he repeated, crossing the room in long strides. "I don't want to waste more time pretending I don't love you, that I don't dream about you every night, that I don't want you by my side raising Matthew, building a family." Claire trembled, her hands seeking support on the crib rail. "Ethan, your mother just gave me her blessing," he completed, stopping inches from her. "She sees what I see, that you're perfect for us, for me." Tears flowed freely down Claire's face now. "But society, people will talk. Let them talk." Ethan held her face between his hands. Jonathan married Rebecca for love, defied all the malicious comments. And you know what happened? They were the happiest years of his life. I won't make the mistake of letting love pass by out of fear of what they'll say. Claire sobbed softly, a smile beginning to form on her lips. "Are you sure?" In response, Ethan kissed her, a kiss different from the previous ones, no longer loaded with repressed desire or guilt, but with promises and love, with future, with certainties. Matthew chose this moment to let out a sigh in his sleep, making them both smile against each other's lips. "Yes," Claire finally responded, her eyes shining with love. "Yes, I'll marry you." Downstairs, Victoria smiled, hearing the murmur of happy voices coming from her grandson's room. The Hayes family was about to gain a new mother, and this time she knew she had made the right choice. The days passed in a frenzy of preparations, cake tastings, dress fittings, flower choices, music selection. Ethan insisted on participating in every detail, even when Claire protested it would bring bad luck. "The only bad luck would be losing you," he murmured against her lips, stealing kisses between one decision and another. One afternoon, while they discussed the guest list in the office, Matthew entered wobbling, a colorful drawing in his small hands. "Mommy, Daddy," he exclaimed proudly, showing 3 stick figures, him in the middle holding hands with Ethan and Claire. The moment perfectly captured what that wedding meant. Not just the union of 2 people, but the rebirth of a family. In the week before the wedding, anxiety was palpable in the mansion. Claire had temporarily moved to a nearby apartment, following the tradition of not seeing the groom before the ceremony. The night seemed endless for Ethan. Lying in his bed, he missed the sound of her footsteps down the corridor, the shared laughter during dinner, the scent she left in the air. "Miss Mommy?" Matthew asked one night while Ethan put him to bed. "Yes, champ," he responded, feeling his heart squeeze. But tomorrow she comes back forever. On the eve of the wedding, the grand estate hall buzzed with final preparations. The winter garden was being transformed into a fairy tale scene. Thousands of white and blue orchids decorated the environment, Rebecca's favorites. A crystal altar had been strategically positioned. The sunset would serve as a natural backdrop for the ceremony. Victoria personally supervised every detail. In a discreet corner of the altar, 2 silver-framed photos would be positioned, Jonathan and Rebecca smiling. It was the way they found to have them present at this special moment. Ethan spent the last night of bachelorhood reviewing his vows. The words flowed directly from his heart to the paper. Beside him, his brother's photo seemed to smile in approval. The sun rose in Connecticut, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, like a blessing for that special day. Claire woke with her heart racing in her temporary apartment. At the Hayes mansion, Ethan had barely slept, anxious for the moment when he would see his bride walking to the altar. Claire's room transformed into a whirlwind of activity from early on. Hairdresser, makeup artist, manicurist. Her hands trembled slightly while the makeup artist applied the final touches. At the mansion, Ethan helped Matthew dress in his small tuxedo. The boy was especially agitated, understanding in his own way the importance of the day. "Are we going to get Mommy?" he asked repeatedly, making Ethan's heart melt. The grand estate was stunning. The white and blue orchids created a path to the crystal altar. Jonathan and Rebecca's photos had been discreetly positioned. The guests began to arrive, filling the environment with cheerful expectation. Ethan waited at the altar, imposing in his custom-made Italian tuxedo. Victoria, elegant in a navy blue dress, held Matthew on her lap, both in the front row. When the first notes of the wedding march filled the environment, all eyes turned to the entrance. Claire appeared, radiant to the sound of the emotional sighs of the guests. Her French lace dress shimmered under the golden light of the evening, every detail sparkling, making her the center of all attention. Ethan felt his breath fail. Tears shone in his eyes as he watched his bride approach. Claire walked alone to the altar, a symbolic choice that represented her independent journey there. The moment Claire reached the altar, Ethan took her hands in his. Through the delicate veil, he could see tears shining in the eyes he loved so much. "Pretty Mommy." Matthew's voice broke the solemn silence, drawing emotional smiles from those present. The celebrant began the ceremony with words about love and new beginnings. He spoke about how some loves are born from the most unexpected circumstances, and how destiny sometimes uses winding paths to unite two souls. The time came for the vows. Ethan was first, his voice hoarse with emotion. "Claire, you entered our lives when we were lost in darkness. You brought light not only to Matthew but to me. Today, before everyone, I promise to love and honor you for all the days of my life. I promise to be not only your husband but your partner, your best friend, your safe harbor. Jonathan taught me that true love overcomes any obstacle. With you, I finally understood." Claire took a deep breath and said, tears flowing freely down her face, "Ethan, you gave me much more than love. You gave me a family. I promise to dedicate every day of my life to making you and Matthew happy. I promise to be your companion in all moments, your strength when you need it, your comfort in difficult times. I promise to honor the memory of Jonathan and Rebecca by being the best mother possible to Matthew and the best wife to you." When the rings were exchanged, the setting sun crossed through the windows, bathing the couple in an almost magical golden light. Victoria held Matthew, who clapped his little hands excitedly, while the photos of Jonathan and Rebecca seemed to smile in approval. "You may kiss the bride," announced the celebrant. Ethan lifted the veil delicately, revealing his now wife's radiant face. The kiss that followed was soft and deep, sealing not only their union but the beginning of a new chapter in the Hayes story. The guests exploded in applause, and Matthew shouted, "Daddy, Mommy," with the excitement of a child who finally saw his family complete. And in that moment, with the sun setting behind them and love filling every corner of the hall, Ethan knew that Jonathan would be proud. The family he loved so much had found a way to continue, to be happy again, to be reborn. The grand estate hall glowed under thousands of delicate lights. The tables, decorated with orchid and crystal arrangements, created an atmosphere of timeless elegance. The dance floor under an artificial starry sky awaited the moment of the newlyweds' first waltz. Claire had changed from her wedding dress to a lighter champagne silk model that allowed freer movements. Ethan couldn't take his eyes off her as he led her to the center of the floor. The first chords of "At Last" filled the environment. "Finally mine," he whispered in her ear as they danced. Matthew insisted on participating in the dance. Ethan picked him up, the three of them spinning together under the emotional gazes of the guests. It was the perfect image of a family being reborn from the ashes of tragedy. During dinner, Victoria rose for a special toast. "Today we celebrate not just a wedding but a miracle of love. Jonathan and Rebecca left us too soon, but I'm certain they're smiling seeing how destiny worked to rebuild our family. Claire, you didn't replace anyone. You created your own space in our hearts. Ethan, my son, seeing you happy again is the greatest gift a mother could receive. The party continued into the night. Matthew fell asleep in his grandmother's arms after dancing joyfully with Claire, his little fingers still clutching the pearl necklace she wore. The guests departed gradually, taking with them the certainty that they had witnessed something special. When the last guest said goodbye, Ethan found Claire on the terrace. She was watching the lights of Connecticut. He embraced her from behind, breathing in the soft scent of her hair. "Ready to go, Mrs. Hayes," he whispered in her ear. Claire shivered at the sound of her new name. She turned in his arms, found those eyes she loved so much shining with an intensity that made her heart race. "Wherever you want," she responded, rising on her tiptoes to kiss him. The car awaited them to take them to the lakeside manor, where they would spend their first night as husband and wife. Victoria had insisted on staying with Matthew so they could have this moment just for themselves. During the journey, Ethan held Claire's hand, intertwining their fingers, playing with the new ring that now decorated her finger. The silence between them wasn't uncomfortable. It was full of expectation and love. "Are you nervous?" he asked softly. Claire smiled, her cheeks blushing slightly. "A little. But it's a good nervousness." "Me too," Ethan confessed, bringing her hand to his lips. "It feels like I've waited a lifetime for this moment." The lakeside manor received them with all the elegance a couple like them deserved. The presidential suite had been prepared especially for them. Rose petals scattered on the bed, champagne on ice, and a stunning view of the lake that sparkled below. Claire stopped at the window, absorbing the view. Ethan approached, wrapping her in his arms from behind. "I can't believe we're married," she whispered. "Believe it," he responded, softly kissing her neck. "You're my wife forever." She turned in his arms. Their eyes met his. There was a silent promise there of love, of dedication, of a future built together. The kiss that followed was different from all the others. There was no more desperate urgency, no more guilt or fear. It was a married couple's kiss, of people who had their whole lives ahead to love each other. When they separated, Claire rested her forehead against his. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" "For giving me a family, for letting me be part of your story. Thank you for accepting to be part of it," Ethan responded, softly caressing her face. Outside, Connecticut continued pulsing. But inside that suite, time seemed to have stopped. Two hearts that had found their place in the world. Two souls that had learned that true love can be born from the most unexpected circumstances. And on that first night as husband and wife, they knew they had made the right choice. The presidential suite at Lakeside Manor was a dream in shades of ivory and gold. Hundreds of scented candles created a dance of shadows on the walls. Red rose petals traced a path to the imposing king-size bed. The jasmine aroma filled the environment. Ethan carried Claire across the threshold like someone carrying a precious treasure. The candlelight transformed the environment into something almost magical. Claire observed in wonder how the shadows danced on the walls, the rose scent mixing with the woody aroma she would always associate with Ethan. Their eyes met through the Venetian mirror. The reflection captured the exact moment when his hands found the zipper of her dress, a simple gesture that carried the weight of all the moments that brought them there. The champagne silk slid down her body like a caress, revealing the French lace she had chosen especially for this night. The sigh Ethan let escape wasn't just desire, it was recognition, as if every curve of Claire was a secret revealed only to him. "You're perfect," he said, his voice hoarse. His eyes traveled over every curve with adoration. Claire's small hands trembled slightly as she unbuttoned his shirt, revealing the defined torso she had secretly admired so many times. Her fingers traced an exciting path along his abdomen muscles, felt them contract under her touch. Ethan captured her lips in a deep, urgent kiss. His hand slid down her back, descended to her waist, reached the curve of her hips, squeezing her firmly. Then they descended down her thighs, making her gasp when his fingers lightly pressed the lace fabric. Claire arched against him, unable to hide her desire. She could feel his warmth through his clothes, his woody scent mixing with the smell of her own heated skin. He guided her to the bed with reverence. Ethan laid her on the Egyptian silk sheets, as if she were the most precious of jewels. His lips traced a path of kisses down her delicate neck, descended to the valley of her chest, still covered by lace. Ethan. She sighed his name like a prayer when he found a particularly sensitive spot. Their bodies danced in a perfect choreography of discoveries. Ethan's hands slid along the sides of Claire's body, fingers playing with the edge of the French lace. His lips traced a path of kisses that made her arch her back in response. "May I?" he murmured against her skin, fingers playing with the clasp of her bra. Her yes came out as a breathless sigh. The delicate lace slid down her arms, revealing more of her satin skin in the moonlight entering through the French windows. Ethan admired for a moment, his gaze a mixture of desire and devotion. Claire blushed under the intensity of that look, but didn't hide. She was surrendered to him, body, heart, and soul. His hands were both strong and gentle, discovering every sensitive point, every place that made her sigh. His lips followed the same path, provoking sensations she had never imagined possible. "You're my miracle," he murmured against her skin between kisses that made her tremble. Claire reciprocated every touch. Her small hands explored her husband's masculine body with curiosity and desire. Her fingers traced the muscles of his back, feeling them flex under her touch. The last barrier between them fell with the same reverence with which they exchanged rings hours before. The candlelight danced on their naked skin, creating golden shadows that made the moment even more magical. Ethan kissed her forehead tenderly. His eyes met hers. There was a silent question, a final confirmation that she was ready. "I love you," she whispered, her voice choked. The clothes fell to the floor in a hurried trail. His shirt opened hastily, the fine lace sliding down her shoulders until it disappeared at the foot of the bed. The contact of naked skin ignited them both immediately, leaving them with no turning back. When they finally came together, the world ceased to exist. Their hips moved in an instinctive compass, each thrust bringing their bodies even closer, each friction drawing moans that mixed with the sound of panting breaths. Ethan, every touch was intense, every kiss stole the air, every movement was deeper, more desperate. Ethan held her tightly as if he feared losing her, and Claire arched against him, totally surrendered. Their bodies collided in increasingly intense movements until urgency took hold of them both. The rhythm grew urgent, ardent, impossible to contain. She bit his lower lip with gentle force, and Ethan responded by invading her mouth with his tongue in an ardent kiss that stole the air from her lungs. The shock of panting breaths ignited them inside, as if each movement was confirmation that there were no longer limits between them. "Claire," he moaned her name against her lips. Pleasure struck them in violent waves, drawing broken moans. Their bodies contorted until the final explosion that left them trembling and surrendered between passionate sighs. Their names mixed like a prayer. The Connecticut night witnessed their total surrender. The moon poured its silver light over the lovers, and when they finally rested intertwined in the silk sheets, Ethan softly kissed Claire's forehead. "Thank you," he whispered. "For what?" "For teaching me that it's possible to love again, that it's possible to start over." Claire smiled, her fingers playing with the hair on his chest. "Thank you for showing me that I also deserve to be loved like this." They fell asleep embraced, their hearts beating in the same rhythm, their souls finally at peace. For the first time in a long while, the future seemed open and unlimited. The morning sun poured lazily through the silk curtains of the presidential suite. Claire woke wrapped in Ethan's strong arms, her skin warmed by contact with his body. The Egyptian cotton sheet barely covered them. She felt a shiver when his fingers began to trace invisible designs on her back. "Good morning, Mrs. Hayes," he murmured against her hair, his voice still hoarse from sleep. She raised her face to meet those eyes she loved so much. Ethan was even more handsome in the morning. Disheveled hair, a lazy smile on his lips. "Good morning." Claire couldn't resist tracing with her fingers the contour of his jaw, felt the stubble under her touch. "Did you sleep well?" he asked, pulling her closer. In response, she kissed him, a slow, deep kiss that tasted of fulfilled promises and new discoveries. His hand slid down her back, provoking shivers wherever they touched. Their legs intertwined under the sheets. Breakfast arrived discreetly, left in the suite's anteroom, but they were too busy rediscovering each other in the morning light to care about croissants and fresh coffee. Later, sitting on the private balcony, they shared strawberries and champagne. Claire wore only Ethan's dress shirt, which barely covered her thighs. He watched her with adoration as she bit into a strawberry. A drop of the scarlet juice escaped from the corner of her lips. "You're beautiful," he murmured, leaning in to capture that fugitive drop with a kiss. Breakfast was forgotten again when he carried her back to the bed, this time with the urgency of someone who discovered an addiction they don't want to break free from. In the days leading up to the trip, Claire visited her parents in Brooklyn. Ethan, always attentive, had already arranged a permanent team from Mount Sinai Hospital to care for the elderly couple during their absence. With the emotional blessing of Joseph and Mary Bennett, Claire could embark peacefully on her new life. On the afternoon of departure, the Hayes family's private jet awaited on the private runway at Teterboro Airport, its elegant silhouette gleaming under the sun. Claire felt her heart accelerate as she climbed the stairs, Ethan's hand firm on her waist. The aircraft's interior was discreet luxury. Italian leather in cream color, noble wood, brushed metal details. "Welcome to your first trip as Mrs. Hayes," Ethan murmured in her ear, guiding her to the seats that transformed into a comfortable bed. Claire's body still vibrated with memories from the previous night, her skin hypersensitive under the navy blue silk dress she had chosen for the trip. While the aircraft gained altitude, leaving Connecticut behind, Claire observed her husband's profile. Ethan had loosened his tie, unbuttoned the first button of his shirt, a casual gesture that always fascinated her. His eyes reflected the sky that was now theirs. His hands played distractedly with the golden ring, a new habit that made her smile. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, capturing her gaze. "About how life can change in a few months," she responded, her voice soft, "from nanny to lady on a private jet." Ethan leaned in. His fingers traced the contour of her face. "From the woman who stole my heart to the owner of my life," he corrected before taking her lips in a kiss that made the flight attendant discreetly retire to the forward cabin. The flight hours transformed into a delicate game of seduction. Protected by the cabin's privacy, cradled by French champagne, they discovered a new dimension of intimacy. It was the art of desiring without being able to touch completely, of suggesting without fully revealing. Ethan watched fascinated as Claire delicately savored the grapes the attendant had served, her lips touching the fruit with an innocence that tortured him. When she leaned to get her glass, her scent invaded his senses, that unique mixture of jasmine with something that was purely Claire. His fingers lightly brushed her thigh, a subtle gesture that made her entire body respond even in the cabin's complicit silence. The night over the Atlantic brought a complicit semi-darkness. The cabin lights were dimmed, creating an intimate environment where only the glow of stars through the windows illuminated them. Claire snuggled in his arms. Her head rested perfectly in the space between his shoulder and neck, as if it had been made to be there. "Paris is waiting for us," Ethan murmured against her hair, provoking a soft smile from Claire, who nestled more in his arms for the final hours of the flight. Outside, the ocean reflected the stars like diamonds scattered on black velvet. Inside the cabin, two hearts beat in the same rhythm, two souls that had found their home in each other. And as they flew toward the city of light, Claire had the certainty this wasn't just a trip, but the beginning of a life where love would always be the final destination. Paris received them with a fine, romantic rain, typical of spring in the city of light. The Plaza Athénée, imposing in its Belle Époque architecture, rose majestically on Avenue Montaigne. The imperial suite, with its privileged view of the Eiffel Tower, would be their love nest for the next few days. Ethan carried Claire in his arms through the golden doorway of the suite. She laughed lightly when he almost tripped on the Aubusson carpet. The room was a dream in shades of cream and gold with details in burgundy red that referred to classic Parisian romanticism. The view from the private balcony took Claire's breath away. The Eiffel Tower seemed close enough to be touched, its iron lace structure cutting against the gray spring sky. The scent of fresh flowers mixed with the aroma of freshly baked croissants. "Mon amour," Ethan whispered in her ear. His arms wrapped around her from behind as they admired the view. His French had a charming accent that made Claire smile. Our first morning in Paris. The fine rain created a silver curtain over the city, making everything more intimate, more magical. Claire felt Ethan's lips on her neck, his hands sliding along the silk of her dress with a familiarity that still made her tremble. "The coffee will get cold," she protested without conviction when he began to open the zipper of her dress. "We can order another," he murmured against her skin. "We have all the time in the world." The dress slid like water down her body in a delicate dance with the golden light entering through the French windows. Ethan remained motionless for a moment, admiring Claire's silhouette against the Parisian sky. The pearl-colored lace of her French lingerie made her skin glow like polished alabaster. "You're Paris itself incarnate," he murmured, his voice hoarser than usual. "Elegant, mysterious, irresistible." Claire's eyes met his through the reflection in the window, a smile playing on her lips as she watched her husband struggle to maintain control. "The coffee," she began. The word died on her lips when she felt his fingers trace a slow path down her spine. "Paris has thousands of cafes," Ethan whispered against her nape, his lips brushing the sensitive skin. "But there's only one you." Between kisses that tasted of red wine and caresses that seemed to have no end, they built their own memories in the city of light. "Je t'aime," she whispered in his ear in the early mornings, her improvised French making him smile before kissing her again. A week passed like a feverish dream of love and discoveries. On the last night in Paris, Ethan prepared a surprise. The suite was transformed. Red rose petals everywhere, scented candles, a table set for two on the balcony. Claire wore the red dress he had bought on Avenue Montaigne, a Valentino that outlined her curves with perfection. The fluid silk moved like water with each step. Her dark hair cascaded loose down her back, the way Ethan liked it most. "You're stunning," he murmured. His eyes traveled over every detail of her with adoration. The private chef served refined dishes of French cuisine, while the Eiffel Tower lit up in the background, as if participating in that particular celebration of love. The glass of Chateau Margaux spun delicately between Claire's fingers. The red wine left her lips even redder. Ethan couldn't take his eyes off her, the way the candlelight danced on her skin, how her eyes sparkled when she smiled, how her neck curved gracefully when she threw her hair back. "Paris will always be ours," he said, standing and extending his hand to her. The first chords of La Vie en Rose filled the environment as he pulled her to dance. Claire let herself be carried by the gentle rhythm, her body molded perfectly to Ethan's. His scent, a mixture of sandalwood and bergamot, intoxicated her, made her head spin more than the wine. "Sometimes I'm afraid to wake up," she confessed, her fingers playing with his jacket's lapel. "It seems too good to be true." Ethan held her face between his hands, his eyes fixed on hers. "It's more real than anything I've ever lived," he murmured before kissing her. The kiss deepened, became more urgent. Ethan's hands slid down Claire's back, feeling the warmth of her skin through the silk of the dress. The music continued playing, but they no longer danced, just moved in their own rhythm, guided by desire. "Come here," he whispered, leading her inside the suite. The candles created a path of golden light to the bedroom. Red rose petals covered the bed. Claire felt her heart accelerate when Ethan stopped behind her. His lips found that sensitive spot on her neck that always made her tremble. With delicate reverence, he opened the zipper of the dress. His fingers traced every inch of exposed skin. The red fabric slid down her skin until it rested silently at the foot of the bed, revealing black lace lingerie that drew a low moan from Ethan. "You kill me, you know," he murmured against her skin, his hands exploring the curves the lace barely covered. His hips pressed against hers in an instinctive gesture. Claire arched in response, her body asking for more even before the words came. Claire turned in his arms. Her agile fingers began to unbutton his shirt. "And you make me relive with every touch," she responded, her voice hoarse with desire. The Parisian night witnessed their passion through the French windows. Every kiss was a declaration of love, every caress a promise of eternity. Ethan loved with an intensity that bordered on devotion, memorizing every sigh, every tremor, every way she said his name. Much later, when the moon was already high in the Parisian sky, they remained intertwined in the disheveled sheets. The scent of roses mixed with the aroma of their bodies, creating a unique fragrance that would always make them remember that night. "London awaits us tomorrow," Ethan commented, his fingers tracing lazy designs on Claire's naked back. She murmured sleepily against his chest. "But Paris will stay forever in our memories." And while the Eiffel Tower sparkled in the distance, they knew it wasn't just a honeymoon. It was the first page of a lifetime written together. Tomorrow brought with it the promise of a new adventure. From the balcony of the Plaza Athénée, Claire observed Paris for the last time, wrapped in the silk robe from the hotel. The city that witnessed the beginning of her married life seemed different now. No longer the romantic capital of postcards, but the setting of their own memories of love. While Ethan handled the checkout, she stored in memory every detail. The aroma of fresh croissants every morning, the glow of the Eiffel Tower against the night sky, the sound of violins in the streets, the taste of red wine shared on secret balconies. Paris had become part of them, a golden page at the beginning of their story. The Eurostar awaited at Gare du Nord, its elegant silhouette promising to take them to new horizons. In first class, Claire settled beside Ethan. Their hands naturally found each other, while the French landscape began to slide past the window. The green fields of France gradually gave way to the English plains, as if nature itself prepared a smooth transition between the two worlds. "You know what I love most about you," Ethan murmured in her ear. With a light touch on her chin, he made Claire raise her eyes from the book she pretended to read. "How your eyes sparkle with every new discovery." The tunnel under the English Channel swallowed the train in darkness. During those minutes of semi-darkness, isolated from the outside world, their lips met in a kiss that carried memories of Paris and promises of London. The taste of French champagne still persisted, now mixing with the expectation of English tea that awaited them. London received them with its typical drizzle and gray sky, but there was a timeless elegance in the city that immediately enchanted Claire. The Ritz, majestic in its Victorian architecture, rose imposingly in Piccadilly. Its tall windows reflected the silver light of the London evening. The royal suite with a view of Green Park was pure British luxury. Shades of emerald green blended with gold and cream in the elaborate tapestries. The antique polished mahogany furniture told silent stories of past centuries. The city revealed itself as the perfect setting for this new chapter of their love story. If Paris had awakened in them an explosive, ardent passion, London enveloped them in a more contained, more mysterious sensuality, like the very mist that embraced the historic buildings. It was as if the city invited them to discover each other more slowly, more deeply, between cups of scented tea and the welcoming warmth of the always lit fireplaces. Ethan pulled her into his arms as soon as they were alone. His lips found that sensitive spot just below her ear. The room was warm, creating a delicious contrast with the London cold they had left outside. "Our story continues," he murmured against her skin, his hand sliding down her waist. "Now on English soil." Claire closed her eyes, let herself get lost in the sensations Ethan awakened. His woody scent mixed with the aroma of tea and fresh flowers that filled the suite. Through the tall windows, the London sky began to darken, promising another night of rain. "We could order dinner in the room," she suggested, her hands already working to loosen his tie. "It's too cold to go out." "Mrs. Hayes." Ethan smiled against her lips, that smile that always made her heart skip a beat. "Are you suggesting we spend our first night in London locked in the room?" "Any objections?" She responded with a mischievous smile, allowing the dress to slide down her body to the Persian carpet. Ethan felt the air escape from his lungs, seeing her under the flickering firelight. There was something different about Claire now, a new confidence that made her even more tempting. The embroidered lace of her lingerie seemed to absorb the fire's glow, transforming her skin into liquid gold. With the feline elegance Claire always admired, Ethan moved through the room, his eyes never leaving hers. The contrast between the fireplace's warmth and the cold beating against the windows created an almost magical atmosphere, as if they were in a world of their own. "You know what I love most about you," he murmured. His fingers traced the contour of her face with reverence. "How you managed to transform every moment into something extraordinary." Claire trembled under his touch, not from cold but from anticipation. The London rain slid down the glass panes in silver threads, creating its own melody for that ancient dance their bodies rehearsed. Under Ethan's hands, her skin came to life, responding to every caress as if it had memory. The fireplace crackled softly, the only sound besides their increasingly heavy breathings. Ethan guided her slowly to the king-size bed, his lips never leaving her skin for long. The rain began to fall outside, creating a natural privacy curtain on their window. "London is already my favorite city," Claire whispered, when she felt Ethan's body press hers against the Egyptian cotton sheets. The fireplace's warmth created dancing shadows on their skin. The London rain drummed softly against the windows. Ethan's hands traced paths of fire through her body, discovering sensitive points she didn't even know she had. Every touch of his drew increasingly deep sighs, every kiss a silent promise of eternal love. Their bodies moved in perfect compass, more intense with each instant, until pleasure enveloped them in overwhelming waves, leaving them exhausted and surrendered in the sheets. The next morning, Claire woke before Ethan. She observed him sleeping, his features softened by sleep, disheveled hair, an expression of peace she rarely saw during the day. For the first time since they met, she had complete certainty she was exactly where she should be. Not as a nanny, not as an employee, but as a woman, as a wife, as part of a story they were writing together. And hearing the rain slowly ceasing outside, Claire knew her real life hadn't begun in Paris or in London, but in the instant she said yes to Ethan and to the destiny that had united them. The days in London had a different flavor from those in Paris. If, in the City of Light, everything was explicit romance, in the English capital there was a contained sensuality, a desire that needed to be discovered between the lines. Ethan and Claire explored the city as they discovered each other, with infinite curiosity and constant surprises. In Covent Garden, among antique shops and cozy cafes, they found a small antique dealer. Ethan bought Claire a Victorian sapphire brooch. "To match the natural nobility you have," he explained. She blushed lightly and only whispered, "Thank you." The afternoon teas at the Ritz were a ritual Claire adored. Sitting elegantly in her green velvet armchair, savoring scones with clotted cream while the rain fell outside, she felt like a true English lady. Ethan watched her with adoration, memorizing every expression of delight on her face. The nights were a mixture of cultural discoveries and intimate moments. At the Royal Opera House, during a performance of Romeo and Juliet, Ethan couldn't resist and kissed Claire's neck in the dark of the private box. She held her breath, trying not to let any moan escape. One particularly cold afternoon, as they walked hand in hand through Hampstead Heath, snow began to fall softly, a rare phenomenon for that time of year. Claire raised her face, letting the flakes melt on her warm skin. Ethan pulled her by the waist, pressing their bodies together in the cold. The kiss stole all the air from her, warming her more than any fireplace. In London, their intimacy gained new contours. The fireplace's fire, the sound of rain against the windows, the aristocratic comfort of the Ritz. Everything created an environment proper for exploring a love that was now more mature, more knowing. Each night brought a new way to discover each other, deeper than the previous one. The return flight had a bittersweet taste of ending and beginning. On the jet, Claire snuggled in Ethan's arms. Her hands played distractedly with his ring. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, kissing her hair. "About how life changed in so little time," she responded softly. "From Nanny to Mrs. Hayes, from dreamer to fulfilled, from the woman who stole my heart to the owner of my life," he completed. Ethan gently pulled her by the chin, making her raise her face for a kiss full of surrender. Connecticut welcomed them with its typical golden late afternoon. The Hayes mansion appeared imposing when the car crossed the gates. After palaces and hotels, nothing seemed more grand than hearing the voice of the sun running through the garden. The joyful scream they so longed to hear echoed through the garden. "Mommy, Daddy." There was Matthew, his little arms extended while Victoria held him, his little face illuminated with that smile that was the perfect mixture of Jonathan and Rebecca. Claire felt tears in her eyes picking up Matthew. The clean baby scent, the warmth of his little body, the way he clung to her neck. It was as if every piece of her heart returned to its place. Ethan wrapped them in his arms, breathed in the aroma of his reunited family. Victoria observed the scene with misty eyes, noticing how her son finally seemed complete, how Claire fit perfectly into that picture. "Welcome back," Victoria said softly, embracing the three of them. After a light dinner in the kitchen, Matthew insisting on sitting in Claire's lap while she tried to eat, it was time to put the little one to bed. It was a touching ceremony, the three together in his room. Ethan reading a story while Claire rocked the son who fought against sleep to not lose a second with his parents. When Matthew finally fell asleep, Ethan led Claire to the master suite, now transformed to receive them. The door opened, revealing a completely renovated environment. The walls in a soft shade of blue-gray, French silk curtains in champagne tone dancing with the breeze, a new king-size bed that promised nights of love. In the corner, a reading armchair Claire had admired months before in a decoration store. On it, a photo album from the honeymoon already assembled by Victoria. "Welcome to your new life, my love," Ethan whispered in her ear, his arms wrapped around her from behind. Claire turned in his arms, tears of happiness shining in her eyes. "It's perfect," she murmured before kissing him. "Everything is perfect." And there, in that room that would witness so many moments of love in the following years, Ethan and Claire sealed not only their return, but the beginning of their life truly together. No longer employer and nanny, no longer passionate fiancés, but husband and wife, parents of Matthew, a family complete at last. Victoria, observing her son and daughter-in-law's happiness in the days that followed, felt her heart at peace. Claire had brought back the light to the Hayes mansion. Not only love, but that joy Jonathan and Rebecca so treasured. The matriarch smiled, seeing how the young woman conducted the house with natural grace, how she cared for Matthew with true devotion, and especially how she made Ethan's eyes sparkle again. Her family was complete once more, and this wasn't just a story about finding love. It was about discovering that sometimes destiny takes us down paths we never imagined, and that the happy ending doesn't always arrive as we expect. Sometimes it arrives better. 3 years had passed since Claire first stepped into the Hayes mansion as a nanny. Now, the cup of steaming coffee sat beside open psychology books. Claire rested her hand on her rounded belly, feeling the baby move while she turned the pages on child development. The kitchen table had become her improvised office. Between bottles and scattered toys, she built her academic future. The Connecticut morning sun entered through the mansion's windows, illuminating the domestic scene that 3 years ago seemed like an impossible dream. "Mommy, Mommy, look what I made." Matthew's voice echoed down the corridor. At 5 years old, he ran through the house with typical energy for his age, his blonde hair disheveled and the smile that mixed Jonathan's features with his own unique characteristics. "What is it, my love?" Claire smiled. closing her book. I made a drawing of our family. Matthew extended a paper full of poorly scribbled colors, but where everyone held hands. Daddy, Mommy, Matthew, and the baby on the way. Claire's heart melted as it always happened. It's beautiful, Matthew. Let's show Daddy when he comes down. Daddy! Matthew shouted as if Ethan could hear him from upstairs. Firm steps descended the stairs. Ethan appeared in the kitchen, tie loosened, a lazy smile on his lips. 3 years of marriage had made their gestures even more natural, more intimate. Look, Daddy, I drew our family. Matthew waved the paper in the air. Ethan crouched down to be at his son's height. Examined the drawing with the seriousness of an art critic. It's perfect, champ. You're an artist. Matthew ran to play in the garden, satisfied with the praise. Ethan approached Claire. His hands naturally found her belly, feeling the gentle movement of the baby. Was it kicking again? He asked, softly, kissing her hair. I think he didn't like the lecture on Piaget. Claire laughed, leaning against his chest. Smart like his mother. They stayed like that for a moment, embraced in the sunny, happy kitchen, hearing Matthew play in the garden, feeling the new life moving between them. Victoria appeared in the doorway, observing the scene with that maternal smile that never hid her satisfaction. Her family was complete, multiplied, happy. Coffee is ready, she announced softly. Thank you, Mom, Claire responded, naturally using the title Victoria so appreciated hearing. Ethan poured coffee for the 2 most important women in his life, then sat beside Claire, his hand resting on hers. The table was a portrait of the life they had built. Psychology books open beside baby bottles, coffee cups mixed with colorful drawings and toys scattered among the study pages. It was the organized chaos of a real family. Are you sure you can handle everything? Ethan asked, looking at the books. College, Matthew, the baby coming. Claire intertwined her fingers with his. I have you, she responded simply. I have our family. I have everything. Matthew came running back, bringing a little yellow flower he had picked in the garden. For you, Mommy, because you're going to have a baby. Claire felt tears well up in her eyes, as always happened when Matthew surprised her with his pure sweetness. Thank you, my love. Ethan observed his wife holding the flower, one hand on her belly, smiling at the son who had united them. He remembered that first morning when she arrived at the mansion as a nanny, nervous, wary, trying to maintain professional distance. Now she was the center of everything. Matthew's mother, the wife he chose, the determined student, the woman who transformed a house into a home. What are you thinking about? Claire asked, noticing his distant look. About how sometimes life takes us down paths that seem impossible, he responded. But there's always a reason. Victoria smiled, remembering Jonathan and Rebecca, as if somehow they had conspired up there to unite those 2 souls. The baby kicked again. Claire made a funny face. I think someone wants to participate in the conversation. Matthew approached, placing his little hand on his mother's belly carefully. Hi, baby. I'm your brother Matthew. When you're born, I'm going to show you my toys. The scene was so simple and yet so perfect that Ethan felt his heart overflow. 3 years ago, his life had crumbled with his brother's death. Today, sitting at the kitchen table with his family, he knew there was no way to plan happiness. It simply arrived at the right time, in the right way. Claire opened the psychology book again, supporting it against her belly. Matthew returned to the garden with his toys. Victoria prepared more coffee. And in the midst of that apparently common daily life, Ethan understood he had found the extraordinary. Sometimes destiny takes us down paths that seem like loss and pain, but it's only to deliver us at the right time, exactly where we should be. If this story touched you, comment where you're watching from. Hit that like button and subscribe to exciting stories. A nanny who wasn't afraid to love. A billionaire marked by loss. From tragedy, hope was born. From hope, love. And from that love, a family was reborn. The months passed in a sweet routine of domesticity and growth. Claire's belly grew, a perfect curve that Ethan couldn't resist touching every time he passed by. Matthew had become the most attentive big brother before the baby was even born, talking to Claire's belly, sharing his day with the little sibling who was coming. The psychology exams were challenging, but Claire faced them with determination. Victoria often found her at dawn, books spread across the kitchen table, one hand on her belly while the other took notes. "My dear, you need to rest," Victoria would say softly. "The baby needs you healthy." "Just one more chapter," Claire would respond with that smile that had conquered them all. Ethan tried to lighten her load, taking over more responsibilities with Matthew. Cooking dinners when Claire was buried in studies, giving her foot massages when her ankles swelled. "You don't have to do all this," she protested weakly one night. "Yes, I do," he responded, his hands working magic on her tired feet. "You're carrying our child and building your future. The least I can do is make sure you're comfortable." The nursery was being prepared next to Matthew's room. Soft yellow walls, white furniture, a mural of forest animals that Matthew had helped choose. "We need bears," he had insisted. "The baby will like bears." One October afternoon, 3 weeks before the due date, Claire was in the library reviewing for her final exam when she felt the first contraction. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but unmistakable. She placed her hand on her belly, breathed deeply, and continued studying. There was time. By evening, the contractions were more regular. Ethan noticed immediately. "How long?" he asked, his voice controlled but his eyes betraying worry. "Since this afternoon," Claire admitted, "but they're still far apart." "We're going to the hospital," he said firmly. "Now, but my exam," she protested, "is in 2 days. It can wait. Our baby can't." The drive to the hospital was a blur. Victoria stayed with Matthew, promising to bring him to meet his sibling as soon as possible. "Don't worry about anything here," she said, kissing Claire's forehead. "Just focus on bringing our new blessing into this world." The labor was long. Ethan never left Claire's side, holding her hand through each contraction, wiping her forehead, whispering words of encouragement. "You're the strongest person I know," he murmured during a particularly difficult moment. "You can do this." 22 hours later, as the Connecticut sun rose on a crisp November morning, their daughter was born. 7 pounds, 3 ounces of perfect miracle. She had Claire's dark hair and what the nurses swore were already Ethan's eyes. "What should we name her?" Ethan asked, cradling the tiny bundle while Claire rested. Claire looked at the photo of Jonathan and Rebecca on the hospital room's side table, placed there by Victoria. "Grace," she said softly. "Grace Rebecca Hayes, for the grace that brought us together, and in honor of the woman who would have loved her." Ethan felt tears stream down his face. "It's perfect. She's perfect. You're perfect." When Matthew met his sister later that day, his face lit up with pure wonder. "She's so small," he whispered, gently touching her tiny hand. "Can I hold her?" With careful supervision, Matthew held Grace for the first time. The look of protective love that crossed his young face made every adult in the room tear up. "I'm going to take care of you forever," he promised his sister solemnly. The Hayes mansion transformed once again. Now there were 2 children's voices filling the halls, 2 reasons to wake up smiling, 2 hearts that depended on them. Claire managed to take her exam, Grace sleeping peacefully in a carrier beside her desk. She passed with honors. "Of course you did," Ethan said proudly when she received her results. "You can do anything you set your mind to." The first year with Grace was exhausting and magical in equal measure. Sleepless nights were shared between Ethan and Claire, taking turns so the other could rest. Matthew helped in his own 5-year-old way, fetching diapers, singing to his sister when she cried, making her laugh with silly faces. "You're the best big brother," Claire told him often, and his chest would puff with pride. Grace's first Christmas was a celebration of life and love. The mansion decorated in silver and gold, an enormous tree in the entrance hall, presents piled high. But the best gift was gathered in the living room. Matthew playing with his new toys, Grace gurgling happily on a blanket, Ethan and Claire watching their children with hearts so full they might burst. "This is everything," Claire whispered, leaning against Ethan's shoulder. "Everything I never knew I needed." "Me too," he responded, kissing the top of her head. Victoria watched from her favorite chair, a glass of wine in her hand, thinking about Jonathan and Rebecca. They would be so proud, she thought. So happy. The family they created continued, grew, flourished. As Grace grew, her personality emerged. She was fearless and curious, always getting into things she shouldn't. She adored her big brother, following him everywhere on unsteady legs. Matthew was endlessly patient, teaching her words, showing her how things worked, protecting her fiercely. By the time Grace turned 2, Claire had graduated with her degree in psychology. The ceremony was a family affair. Ethan in the front row holding Grace, Matthew beside him waving enthusiastically when Claire's name was called. Victoria dabbed tears from her eyes, so proud of the young woman who had become like a daughter. "You did it," Ethan said that night after the children were asleep, pulling Claire into his arms. "Against all odds, managing everything, you did it." "We did it," she corrected, standing on her tiptoes to kiss him. "I couldn't have done any of it without you." The years continued to unfold in a beautiful tapestry of ordinary moments that felt extraordinary. First days of school, lost teeth, scraped knees, bedtime stories. Claire opened a small practice, working with children and families. Matthew grew tall and thoughtful, so much like Jonathan it sometimes took Ethan's breath away. Grace became a whirlwind of energy and joy, lighting up every room she entered. There were hard days, of course, days when the grief of losing Jonathan and Rebecca surfaced unexpectedly, days when Claire doubted herself, wondering if she was enough. Days when Ethan felt overwhelmed by the responsibility of raising his brother's son while managing the company and being present for his own family. But they faced every challenge together. Their love, the anchor that kept them steady. One evening, when Matthew was 10 and Grace was 5, the family gathered in the library. It had become their tradition, this quiet time together before bed. Matthew was reading to Grace, his voice patient as he helped her sound out words. Claire was curled up with a professional journal. Ethan was supposedly reviewing documents but was actually watching his family. "This is it," he thought. "This is the life I never imagined I'd have. Better than anything I could have planned." As if reading his thoughts, Claire looked up and smiled. That smile that had first captured his attention in this very house 7 years ago. That smile that still made his heart skip. "I love you," he mouthed silently. "I love you too," she mouthed back. Victoria entered with hot chocolate for the children and wine for the adults. "A Hayes family tradition," she announced. Matthew and Grace cheered, abandoning the book to get their treats. As the children sipped their chocolate, leaving mustaches on their upper lips, Ethan pulled Claire close. "Thank you," he whispered. "For what?" she asked, though she knew. "For walking through those gates 7 years ago. For loving Matthew. For loving me. For this family. For everything." Claire thought back to that March morning when she had arrived, nervous and unsure, never imagining how her life would change. Never imagining she would fall in love with the broken man in the mansion. Never imagining she would become a mother, a wife, a psychologist. Never imagining this beautiful, chaotic, perfect life. "Thank you for letting me stay," she whispered back. Years continued to pass. Matthew graduated high school, tall and handsome, with Jonathan's smile and Rebecca's kind eyes. He was accepted to Yale, his father's alma mater. The day he left for college, Claire cried into Ethan's shoulder. "He's going to be fine," Ethan assured her, though his own voice was thick with emotion. "We raised him well." "We did," she agreed, wiping her tears. "Jonathan and Rebecca would be so proud." "They would," Ethan said, looking at the photo on the mantel, "just like I'm proud. Of Matthew, of Grace, of you, of us. Grace was now a teenager, smart and spirited, dreaming of becoming a doctor. She had Claire's determination and Ethan's business sense. She adored her older brother, video calling him constantly at college, sharing every detail of her life. Claire's practice had grown. She was known for her compassionate approach, her ability to help families heal. She never forgot where she came from, often taking on clients who couldn't afford her full fee. "Everyone deserves help," she would say when Ethan gently questioned her about her business model. "We're fortunate. We can afford to give back." "That's one of the million reasons I love you," he would respond, pulling her close. Hayes Industries continued to thrive under Ethan's leadership. He had modernized the company while honoring his brother's vision. Jonathan would be proud, the board members often said, and Ethan knew it was true. One spring afternoon, 20 years after that first March morning, Ethan found Claire in the garden. She was reading beneath the old oak tree, her hair now touched with gray, her face lined with the beautiful marks of a life well lived. She looked up and smiled. That smile, after all these years, it still made his heart race. "Room for one more?" he asked. "Always," she said, patting the ground beside her. He settled next to her, his body fitting perfectly against hers as it always had. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun filter through the leaves, listening to the birds sing. "Do you ever think about how different our lives could have been?" Claire asked. "If I hadn't taken that job, if you hadn't hired me, if we hadn't fallen in love." "Every day," Ethan admitted. "And every day I thank God it happened exactly as it did." "Even the hard parts?" she asked. "Even Jonathan and Rebecca dying, especially that," he said quietly. "I would never wish for their deaths. The pain of losing them still catches me off guard sometimes. But if it hadn't happened, I wouldn't have you. Matthew wouldn't have had you as his mother. Grace wouldn't exist. Our life wouldn't exist." Claire nodded, understanding. "Destiny," she murmured. "Destiny," he agreed. "Taking us down paths we never imagined to get us exactly where we needed to be." His phone buzzed. A text from Matthew, photo attached. They opened it together. Matthew with a young woman, both beaming, her hand extended to show a ring. "I'm engaged," the text read. "Her name is Sarah. Can't wait for you to meet her. Bring her home," Ethan texted back immediately. "We'll plan a celebration." Claire was already crying happy tears. "Our baby is getting married. He's not a baby anymore," Ethan said gently. "He's a man, a good man. Because of you. Because of us," she corrected. Another text came through. This one from Grace. "Got into medical school. Starting at Johns Hopkins in the fall." More tears from Claire. More hugs. More gratitude for the beautiful life they had built from tragedy. That night, lying in bed in the room they had shared for 20 years, Ethan pulled Claire close. "I would do it all again," he said into the darkness. "Every moment, every choice, every challenge, it led me to you. And I would walk through those gates again," Claire responded, scared and uncertain, not knowing my life was about to change forever, because it led me to you. They fell asleep as they always did, intertwined, two hearts beating as one, two souls that had found their home. The Hayes mansion stood in the Connecticut moonlight, filled with love, filled with memories, filled with the promise of tomorrow. Inside, a family slept, a family built not from perfection but from tragedy transformed into hope, from loss transformed into love, from endings transformed into new beginnings. And somewhere, Jonathan and Rebecca smiled. Their son was loved. Their family continued. Their legacy lived on in the laughter of grandchildren they never met, in the love story that began with their death but created so much life. This is where our story ends. But for Ethan and Claire, for Matthew and Grace, for the Hayes family, it was just another chapter in a life filled with love. Sometimes the greatest love stories don't start with love at all. Sometimes they start with loss, with grief, with impossible circumstances. Sometimes they start when a young woman walks through a gate, looking for a job, and finds instead her destiny. Sometimes they start when a broken man hires a nanny and finds instead his salvation. And sometimes those stories become the most beautiful of all, because they're built on more than passion. They're built on healing, on growth, on choosing each other every day through the mundane and the magnificent. That's the kind of love that lasts. That's the kind of love that transforms. That's the kind of love that Ethan and Claire found. And that's the kind of love that, once found, never lets go. So where are you watching from? Did this story touch your heart like it touched mine? Give it a rating from 0 to 10 in the comments below. And if you believe in love that conquers all, in families built from broken pieces, in destiny that knows better than we do, hit that subscribe button. Because there are more stories to tell, more hearts to touch, more reminders that love, in the end, always wins. Thank you for joining me on this journey. Until next time, remember that your own love story is being written every day. Make it beautiful. Make it count. Make it yours.